I'm Diana Ayton-Shenker, and I'm so happy to be here and grateful not only for this time with Ken Burns and the preview of the Leonardo documentary, but I'm thrilled to be here with all of you and this community of people who join together in inspiration tonight. Inspiration of how we ask questions, how we explore creativity, how we unlock creative genius. And to come into conversation, I want to first thank all those who made this possible tonight. Of course, first our partner, Arizona PBS, and the general manager, Scott Wolfel. We're so grateful. Thank you. I want to take a moment to thank all of the staff who worked so hard to pull this together quickly and seamlessly, and thank everyone's patience and participation. And now it's my great, great pleasure to call up to conversation with me the incredible gift we have in our community of Liz Lerman. So Liz, I'll call you up and just share a few things with the group about you.
I'm coming.
So Liz Lerman is the perfect person to be talking with about creative genius, not only because she has been recognized for her genius in creative arts from MacArthur Foundation's and MacArthur Genius, but also, and more importantly for me personally, because she embodies and enables us to see the tools that unlock creativity and creative genius in all of us. Liz's true genius is not just the awards and accolades she deserves and has earned, but her, like Leonardo, life as a work of art, as a work of creative genius that is still vibrant and still unfolding and brings all of us along with her. So we're very honored to have Liz as an Institute Professor of the Herberger Institute of Design and Arts, join us here at ASU, and very excited to unpack and share some of the thoughts following that experience of listening to Ken and watching some of the film. So welcome, Liz.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. That was so fun. Wasn't it just, I didn't anticipate being that amazing to sit that close to him and then see and have you here, and knowing everybody's here together and seeing it for the first time. Anyway, I really enjoyed just the moment itself. So, and thanks.
Well, yeah. Me too. I was loving it, loving it. One of the things I didn't get to raise with Ken that Liz has embodied in her work and pursued and continues to explore in her creative practice. And that's this fluid, intersectional, cross-disciplinary connectivity across arts and science. If we were to ask Leonardo, well, are you an artist? Are you a scientist? He probably wouldn't have even understood that as a valid question. He would have said, I'm pursuing questions. And as Ken Burns says, aren't we all? But Liz, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to that cross-disciplinary flow in your creative practice and how that's evolved for you.
Yeah, partly I just want to say, is it on?
Let's just share.
Okay, great. I don't have to wait. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you said that. I have always loved Leonardo's drawings and writings. The relationship of that incredible, sometimes almost like hyper reality that the drawings have, knowing then there's text, and then there's these abstract things that go on. And for me, that's like just a beautiful reflection of the question you've asked, but perhaps this story may also relate to it. And since Ken mentioned stories is the way to go, I don't talk about getting the MacArthur very much, but occasionally they bring MacArthur people together. And I was brought together with a man named Hideo Mabuchi, who is a scientist at Stanford, but also a ceramicist. And we were asked together to speak about our work. And he went first and he talked for a few minutes. He said, you know, artists and scientists, they do a lot of research. And I'm sitting here going, yeah, to myself. And then he said something that I had never heard or thought. He said, it's nourishment. That it's essential. It nourishes us. And ever since I heard that, it helps me understand the nature of the kind of drive that curiosity is. It's life's elements. And it got me thinking that it's not just artists and scientists. I would add to that group religious leaders. And more recently, I've been thinking about community organizers, that there's a kind of a push, a reach, a desire to understand things. And then the action is to find the understanding. I mean, this idea that Leonardo stopped partway through because he'd gotten what he got. I mean, I'm familiar with this and have walked away, or actually usually in my case, I reiterate and I realize I've been asking the wrong question. I don't leave the event I'm doing, but I think, yeah.
But that's such a rich example of creative practice as a practice rather than the product, because that irrepressible curiosity that is nourishing is what we're seeking and offering through our creative practice. So as you're saying, it might lead to a reiteration. That's how you live your life and what you make possible for other people to open up and discover in their creative practice. That's so liberating. One of the things that's hard with a creative genius like Leonardo is, how do you find your way in? I could never paint what he paints. I could never be that person. And one of the things I appreciate about your work, Liz, is that you make it okay for everyone to find who they are in a collective creative practice. So I want to ask more about how you do that and how that's changing for you.
Well, one way in for me is to consider this thought that creativity is a birthright and that we are each, every one of us, born with that capacity and capacities. And if you study the Old Testament, you know that birthrights get stolen. There are all kinds of ways that we get tripped up over our relationship to that very thing that's ours. And it's interesting teaching here. I love teaching the students that are here at ASU. This semester, I have first and second year grad students in the School of Dance, Music, and Theater. And there's a combination of things that I'm trying to get at. And one, and Ken, it was wonderful. He spoke to it about each of us has, it's our own story. We have to find our own way. It's our own journey. And I feel to a certain extent, one of my jobs here is to convince the students and sometimes faculty and staff too, that their experience matters, that how they see things actually is meaningful. At the same time, being willing to submit that to other people's worldviews. Like, I can't only have my own view. I'm working on a book right now, and it opens with this. When I was a little girl, I thought that when you got married, you were given eyeglasses, because everybody I knew who was married had glasses. So, okay, really smart, right? That my worldview, it's wrong. So yes, I should have agency, but also I have to submit to these other ways of thinking. And of course, you watch Leonardo. Now he is driven to submit by all kinds of things that he constructs for himself, which I love. I mean, I think that's was great to see. And I thought the way that Ken Burns brought it out, particularly the part about how to see where the forms are living. I just have to put in a plug for just a minute, and I know you've got, I can see it. Diana's got a million questions here, but I was intrigued how much movement was a line between the form and the thought. As a choreographer and formerly a dancer, that beautiful section, right, where you saw the man's back and you saw the wings going and recognizing, and then for me, when Ken said, he used his hands, he said, well, you could be up here, down here, and and we want to get between those. And I was thinking, yes, well, if you're on an airplane, the difference between this and this is a lot of turbulence. And that's what I want people to understand, is that we can manage the turbulence. We can. We have skills for this. That's where our creativity might even live. And I think if you can ride that, which I'm guessing Leonardo must have just done all the time.
Well, I know that we need to ride that turbulence. I literally wrote down notes as I was sitting next to you, Liz, when that part of the film came on, to ask you about that golden thread of throughout Leonardo's work of unifying pattern of organic form, I thought, and motion. And that's so it is finding that unifying pattern of organic form through movement. And that's partly your creative practice, but also your lived experience. And I appreciated how the film recognizes the value of lived experience, that Leonardo considered it a liberation, that he wasn't allowed to study formally at university, and that forced him to have nature as his teacher, and the lived experience being a disciple of experience as the way that he could unlock his creative practice and get through that turbulence, that who we are matters. So there were like three other things immediately that I wanted to ask and talk about as you were saying, but I wanted to come back to that lived experience. One of the extraordinary things about your creative practice and the genius that unlocks is recognizing the value of everyone's lived experience as creative, that our work, our lives are works of art. I don't need to make a product to be creative. It is our birth. We all know it. We all had that spark, at least when we were children. And when we're not paying attention, we still have it today. What if we paid attention to that? And where is that for you now, with valuing lived experience in relation with students, with your work, with others?
Well, before I came to Arizona State University, there was a period of time where I ran my own dance company. We were an unusual company. The idea was equal commitment to concert and community. So you would see us on concert stages, including Gamage. We toured here quite a bit, but also places like shipyards or hospitals and prisons and all kinds of places. But in particular, with this question of Diana's, I'll just take you to the shipyard, because we spent about 18 months in the shipyard in New Hampshire, which was on the closing list. And the community wanted to preserve the stories. It was 12 generations of people who had lived and worked on the yard, and they wondered what was going to happen to the stories. And so we were part of helping them discover that, hold them. We made many, many things around it. But one night I got to spend time with the officers' wives. So this is a naval facility, and the officers in our Navy, they move them every 2 years. So the women, the wives, in this case, the men were working. I know there are women who are also in the service itself, but in this case, it was the wives. They also have to get good at figuring out how to land in a community, find their friends, and move on, because it's going to be like steady. And the conversation turned to that, and one of them said, we're the most liberated women in America. And I love it when my ideas are completely upended. I mean, as soon as somebody says something that is so outside my sensibility, I'm so excited to find out because I didn't think that would be true. I said, what do you mean? She said, we birth the babies, we change the tires. Because the guys are gone. They're out on the boats. And there's much more to this story, which I could tell. But at the end of that evening, we sort of said back to them what we had been hearing. And she said, it takes you to help us see it. Mm. But in other words, people don't know they're having it without a reflection back. And this is one of my strongest feelings about the role that art can play, or a night like tonight, where we might be together and spend some time reflecting on it. I hope when you're going home, you're talking to each other about these things. How do we get to engage outside in our normal everyday life and sharing the things that matter?
And that's where recognizing, holding up as a mirror, the role of the creative in showing us our gorgeous genius that is our birthright as humans, as creative beings, is so important, that our living experience and our lived experience matters. But it can't just matter in isolation. To come alive, it needs to be communicated. You use the word submitted to others. I would say offered or communicated. I have a story too about that. Stories, since we're telling stories. When I was a child, and I went with my family to the zoo, probably called Wildlife Preservation Center now, but it was called a zoo when I was a kid in Portland, Oregon. And I was little, like 4 years old, maybe 5. I think I was 4. And I was with my 2 brothers and my parents and another family we were close with, and their 3 sons. I was the only girl. And I knew what I wanted to do at the zoo. I wanted to go see the elephants. And so I said, I'm going to go see the elephants. And I walked off and went to the other end of the zoo to see the elephants. And I found my way there, and I arrived at the elephants. It was pretty far away. It had been a while. And I realized I was lost. No, I wasn't lost actually, but I had been lost by others. And I started looking around, and there was no one I knew there. And just as this was settling in, that I said, I want to see the elephants. I knew I want to see the elephants. I didn't stop to find out if that was heard. It hadn't been heard. I heard it, but it hadn't been heard. It wasn't enough for me to be clear in the intention of my mind, or even the way I communicated. It needed to be received. It needed to be in relation. And of course, all that like came to a head. All of a sudden, this is sinking in my 4-year-old mind, and I saw my other family friend's dad, whom I called uncle, and a police officer. They'd been looking for me, and all of a sudden I cried because I realized I had been lost by them. I wasn't lost, but no matter how clear we are in our pursuits, we can't submit them to isolation. We need to live in relation. And that's ultimately, I think, an important gift and lesson from Leonardo, and the exquisite meanderings of his mind, and that intention that he got it out. He connected in relation.
I think one thing, when you think about his notebooks, and I wonder about this for people, how, I don't know what your inner life is like. I know mine is like, there's a constant kind of thing going. And one of the, I have a colleague here who's always telling his students, make sure you get it out of your head somehow. And I'm wondering about these codexes as you're telling this story, and how much that meant that he had a place to put this stuff. I love that he was disciplined in his undisciplinedness. One of the things, of course, we struggle with both at this campus and in so many places, not just on campuses, but in our world, is my husband right now is going through some medical stress and trying to get the pulmonologist to talk to the cardiologists. It's like, really, I mean, I have to really wrangle them to get them in the same room together. And that is that, of course, it's wonderful to pursue something in depth, but we have to find ways to bring ourselves across the membranes. I don't know if you listen to Radio Lab, but I sometimes, I'm in the car. I usually only hear like a little bit of it, and it always catches my attention. They're a little annoying, but I do like some of it said, this was a one on anesthesia, and they were saying they don't entirely understand what anesthesia does, but they think the brain, and there's probably somebody here who knows this much better than me, but my retelling of it is this: the brain just goes down to one single thread. It doesn't talk to itself anymore. And that to me is such a wonderful metaphor for this thing I'm talking about. It's like, yes, we need that singular thing, but we need to be able to cut across our disciplines. He didn't have disciplines in some ways, right? I mean, he sees the woods, he sees he's drawing, he's painting. There's something so powerful about that, because what I see again in my own discipline, the rules and regulations of dance and how much we had, what kind of rebellions we had to put up in order to break through, and then what our students are going through. So
that restlessness of the mind and of our creative curiosity, that's most of the time we hope not anesthetized, and too much of the time distracted, derailed by the busyness of our lives, the anxiety of our to-do list, or the state of our world or our personal sphere. It is something that brings me to shape and motion and insomnia, and the book that you're working on now. And I wonder if you can tell us a bit about what inspired you to turn your attention to an insomniac's guide of this world in constant motion, this restlessness of our mind.
So I spent, you never know where the story begins. There was the museum in Seattle that was working with artists who were using biological material in their art. And it caused a big upset in the community. Seattle people were protesting and all kinds of stuff. So they called me up and asked me if I'd come, because I have something called the critical response process that I invented, which is a way of giving feedback. I actually wouldn't have worked in that setting, but I did go out and spend time with them and time with the public, looking at sort of, again, artistic ways in which we could examine the fact that people were really, really upset about this. And I ended up deciding, when they called me, I said, I don't know anything about what you're talking about biology. And so they overnighted me, I like to say 20 pounds worth. And what they sent me was all the genetic fear stuff that was coming. This was just at the genomic revolution, was just starting. We're not going to, there were so many scary stuff. So I decided I would make a piece about this because I didn't know anything about it. And that's already the first connection. If you don't know something, go make some art about it and you'll figure things will happen. So we made that piece. It toured for a long time. It's a very popular piece, but I was at the University of Michigan with it, and I was approached after the show by a group of physicists. They said, we want one. And so I said, no, actually, I'm kind of done with this. But they said, no, you have to go. And then they said, they're smashing the particles at CERN. They're about to, that's where they made the thing where they're going to discover the origin of the world. And I said, that's wonderful, but what about other people's origin stories? What's going to happen? And to their credit, I mean, I'm so happy. There we all were standing there and said, that's a really good question. So I did go to CERN. I took some dancers with me. We were able to be in the tunnels before they pushed the buttons, spent a lot of time. And that's where I learned about, this is why it was a long story, Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which I'm now going to, again, put in my own words. If you measure the shape of something, you will not be able to catch the momentum. But if can you say that again? If you are busy measuring, somebody's going to help me, isn't it? I know somebody knows this better, but my version is this. If you measure the shape of a thing, you will not be able to get its momentum. But if you live in its momentum, you will not be able to get its shape. That's kind of a version. I see somebody going, but for me, it was like such a great choreographic puzzle and a theory of change. Like we hold our shape too long, like institutions hold their shape too long. And it's hard to drop into momentum because, as I said, momentum's got turbulence. It's hard. But if you're only in momentum, you can't see it. You won't be able to see the thing. So what is that relationship between them? And I actually think our capacity to move between shape and momentum is a definition of creativity, not the, but a. And I was thrilled to see Leonardo so busy at work, at least the way Ken Burns was showing it. And that's why he did those. He said he wanted the dual films. He's showing two sides of something, right? He's trying to help us see that relationship of when the rock turns into the river. So I'm interested in looking at, if you think about shape and momentum now as a theory of change, it helps me understand, say, the problem with monuments. The monument of, say, General Lee in the South, has a shape, has a meaning, has a thing. I don't want to cancel that. It's evidence of a time and a way life was, even though it's so harmful to some people. So could we get in momentum? Could we live in momentum in relationship to that shape and understand we don't have to cancel everything, but we have to understand how do we hold that shape and see it for what it might be, including its harm, but also understand it in a new light. That's like a version. Even my stepmother's dementia, I've been thinking about is a form of shape and momentum. You know, she tries every time when I come see her, I can see her trying to form the shape in her mind of what this person is in front of her. You can see her working to make it.
Well, that tension between shape and motion, shape and momentum is also how we live our lives, right? So there's that mirror again of lived experience mattering, and how we then wrestle with that through our creative pursuit, our curiosity. So you mentioned critical response process, and I want to come back to that as something that seems to have both shape and momentum. Mm-hmm. So first of all, I'm going to invite you to tell us what CRP is, and let's, if we could, spend a moment thinking about it in both a sense of shape and momentum, because I think that it facilitates that tension in a way to navigate it so creatively.
Thank you. I hope everybody's doing okay. I know we've been sitting for a bit. Maybe we'll dive into this for a bit and see where we get to. But critical response process is really is a way to look at our judgment. I think we have our judgments constantly, like neutrinos. They're coming at us and we're having them. But for me personally, as an artist growing up, I needed to come to terms with the nature of critique and what that is. And so I invented this as a sort of humane system with the idea that wouldn't it be amazing if critique made us want to go back to work, not put us to bed for 4 days wondering why we thought we could do the thing, right? Like, get me back to work. And that was what I worked on for a number of years. And basically, it works with the idea of work in progress, which again was alluded to in this film. We are never finished. We are never finished. And the critical response process allows you to live in that world, receive criticism, give yourself some criticism, but also move through it with some humanity, I hope. Basically, just really quickly, the first step after, if you showed me some of your work, the first thing that would happen is I would tell you what was meaningful about it. What was interesting, provocative, surprising, delightful, curious. The way I sat down.
I have to just jump in and say, how great is that to begin with what's meaningful? And how often we just skip right over that.
You saw me do it when I sat here. And I said, wasn't that fun? Wasn't that amazing? I enjoyed it. And then I tried to say 1 or 2 things that had happened. It's just an automatic thing with me. What just happened? It's in the spirit of goodwill. It doesn't mean that I have to love everything. It doesn't mean that I'm not critical, that I'm not holding some negative thoughts about something that went on. I just don't start with them. And besides, my negative thoughts might change if we have a conversation. It's not just the work that's in progress. My ideas could be in progress too. My opinions might change too. So what's meaningful? And then if you showed, well, I'm going to switch it. Let's say I'm the one who showed the work. If I showed you my dance, the second step is I get to ask you questions. I can ask you anything about what you just saw. And you can tell me anything you want about what I ask. You just have to stay on topic. You cannot change the subject. So if I say to you, what do you think about the ending of my dance? You could say the ending's terrible. You could say it's good. But you can't say, oh, I don't know about the ending. I don't like your hair. Can't do that. That's where most critique goes downhill. I'm telling you, right? My daughter invites me into her room to help her with her homework. And I tell her to clean up her room. That was not the contract. That was not the invitation, right? And you don't get the homework, and you get a slammed door, and you don't get a clean room. You don't. So don't. But I'm the mother. I have a right to talk about a clean room, just not then. That's the third step. I get to ask questions then. And there's a filter in every step. In the third step, you try to keep your questions neutral. You try not to embed your opinion in the question. You try to really be curious. It's all about curiosity. How many questions, while I'm sort of testing and probing if the thing I'm thinking about. And then in the final step, you could say, Liz, I have an opinion about the ending of your dance. Would you like to hear it? An informal critical response process, it's consent driven. I could say no, but I won't say no if you tell me something meaningful. If you answer my question, if you ask me a question, and then you offer this opinion that you have worked through, we have built a relationship. And that's what I'm trying to do. Critical response builds a relationship so that you can go all the way through. And it's actually pretty natural, but that's what CRP is.
And
So,
it has both shape and momentum.
It
It also really came back to bite me because I thought it was so inspiring. I taught my family this, and I fell right into that trap of parenthood with my daughter, who called me into her room to help with homework, and I'm like, "What is going on in this room?" And she said, "What would Liz Lerman say?" So yeah, so that happened. But the tool of this shape and motion of critical response process is one of many tools that helps us be creative. And I wanted to ask you about the other tools in your toolbox and your work looking at creating an atlas of creative tools.
What I think what we're really talking about here is I'm trying to make a case for, I said earlier that creativity is a birthright, but I thought Ken Burns addressed this too. We have to reflect on our life while it's happening. Remember, he said it's hard work. It's hard work. It's not, it just doesn't go by. I mean, you can't just be content. I think of this as extreme reflection. So for example, if I said to you, and you're getting ready to do something that's important to you, what do you do before you start? What do you do? And somebody might say, oh, I go outside, I take a walk. Somebody might say, oh, I go get my coffee. To me, this is a form of ritual that you are forming, and inside it are some tools you could test. It's like every act we have, we can sort of test again, is it worth sharing? And for me, formulating the tool allows it to be shareable. Many of them are embodying, things to do with gesture. Like I said, I watched Ken. I was busy watching one, because did you see how still he was? Did you? Very still. But when he did move, at one point he did this. He came way forward in his seat. And when that happens, he's talking about something that's really important to him. And that kind of thing, observing when that happens. And then there are things that we can do with the tools themselves. But
okay, Liz.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how inspiring that was, because I think everyone was kind of absorbing a wave of inspiration, and that is so nourishing. We need that. We love that. That's a glimpse of an inspired mind. I want to hear some of your thoughts, emergent thoughts, on what it is to have an inspired mind, and how creative practice cultivates or trains that, and as opposed to what?
So my students, they do a lot of comparing to each other. Do you know this feeling? Maybe you still do it. Looking across our wonderful room here, how many times we come, oh, do I look as good as that person I just passed? What am I going to wear today? I just wrote this thing, it's not very good. Oh, Mozart was 29, look what I'm doing. That kind of stuff. What is that? And one of the things that I'm working on with my students is to get them to see if there's a way, instead of comparing themselves, to be inspired instead. So when somebody does something, instead of putting myself down, I ask instead, what just interested me about that? And what's the tool? And could I borrow that? Could I borrow that? Now, in order to do that, maybe I'll just give one little philosophical thing, and that is an idea I have about the horizontal. When I began my dance company, we started touring at the same time that my mother got really sick and died rather suddenly from cancer and sent me into a I decided to make a piece about it. Again, I wanted to understand what had happened, and I took myself to a senior center to dance with old people, because this was in the 70s. So it's not like now where everybody's old. and it's also we're also physical. I mean, in the 70s, it was pre-jogging. There weren't even people running around in the streets. I mean, it's just such a different era. So I found these old people who were willing to let me dance with them, because I wanted them to welcome my mother into whatever. And this turned out to be life-changing. I spent 10 years in the senior center and figured out so many things that mattered to me. But this is what happened to me during that 10 years. As I said, we were touring places like the Kennedy Center and Gamage, and then I was working in the senior center. And people would say, well, Liz, it's that work you do at the Kennedy Center that's up here, and the work that you're doing in the nursing homes, okay, that's down here. This is art. I don't know what this is. Okay. Or people did this. And they said, oh, the work in the community, that really matters. That's really important. Why are you still performing in theaters? It's old, it's white, it's European, it's why are you doing that? So I did this with my hands, really easy to do. Instead of this, which is so impoverished, I said, wait a minute, I want to live a life like this. The reason I'm telling you this is that, let's go back to making comparisons. Most of our world is vertical. And when you make a comparison in a vertical world, you literally have to put the other thing down. You literally have to. It's vertical. Put it down. But if you live in the horizontal, then you can make distinctions without rancor. Because making distinctions is so creative. I'm not you. We are a lot alike. I'm not you. It's such a creative act to be able to make distinctions. Remember Sesame Street? How is this thing not like this thing? I mean, we start young with it. So I'm trying to live in a world where we can have this wild creativity and try to avoid the pitfalls. And one of them is working on this horizontal and trying to remember. And what's really interesting about the horizontal is that if you make it a circle, I mean, usually the two ends aren't so far apart. But this proved to be a way of thinking for me. Yes to nursing homes, yes to concert stages. This is Leonardo. Yes to science. Yes to art. Yes to drawing. Yes to words. Yes to writing backwards. Yes to a mirror. Yes to all those yeses, I think.
Yes, and more and more. I want to do just a little check-in, because I could stay listening to and talking with Liz all night. I know that I was taught by my mentor when I first started teaching at Hunter College, that we teach what we need to learn. So I'm always wondering, what do we need to learn now? One of the things I'm learning is to read the energy of the room, and I'm feeling that there was so much richness in this conversation and in Ken's presentation and the film that I want to give us a little space to absorb that. And invite us to continue to engage ourselves with that challenge of pursuing the questions of discipline to virtue. The notion that I want to reject that we've abandoned virtue. No, we haven't. We have that choice. We have that agency. And that capacity for choice is a creative act. It is the art of the life we live. So I want to, on that note, maybe wrap up this evening. Thank you so much, Liz Lerman. Please join me in thanking Liz.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you.
And I invite you to continue to engage with Leonardo, the International Society of Art, Science, Technology, Leonardo-ISAST, and our partnership with Arizona State University where we are very proud to be continuing to grow and explore our work of creativity across disciplines, across art, science, technology, looking for that golden thread that is a unifying pattern, our birthright of curiosity and compassion that finds expression in creativity. Finally, I'll turn it back over to our colleague from Arizona PBS, who is our wonderful host for this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.